The Denver Broncos just received brutal news on a position that was already thin. Now, according to this tweet here from Mike Kliss, per the NFL Transaction Wire, Broncos defensive lineman Ioma Uwazurike, second-year man, former fourth-round pick last season, was suspended indefinitely for betting on an NFL game in the 2022 season. He is going to be out for at least all of 2023 because he bet on NFL games. Now, this is an absolutely brutal blow to the Denver Broncos defensive line, and the NFL has come out and made a clear statement that they are not going to tolerate any violations of their gambling policy. The NFL has made their gambling policy pretty clear to players. Players are not allowed to place bets on NFL games under any circumstances. Ioma Uwazurike ended up getting suspended for the whole season because he bet on at least one NFL game, according to this tweet from Mike Kliss. The NFL has said they're not going to mess around with that kind of stuff. Now, the NFL has made it clear that if you are caught betting on even one single NFL game, you will be suspended for at least one season. But even then, there could be a chance that he could be out even longer than that because this is an indefinite suspension, at least 1 year. Now, we can sit here and have the conversation about the NFL's hypocrisy when it comes to this issue because they're suspending players who gamble for a full season when we have players who have done arguably way more disgusting acts, not even arguably, just way more disgusting acts, and they only received 11 games for their suspension. So for the NFL, as hypocritical as it is, they are going to suspend players if they are caught breaching that trust with the league and betting on NFL games. The reason why players such as Jameson Williams of the Detroit Lions only got suspended for 6 games is because they did not bet on NFL games, but they did bet on either an NCAA game or an NBA game or a UFC fight or something like that. But they made that bet while they were at work, while they were at the Lions facility, while they were traveling for a team-regulated event, something along those lines. You cannot place bets even on other stuff other than the NFL if you are at work doing a team-related activity. So you can't make a bet on the NCAA or the NBA while you're at the team facility. You can't do it while you're on the road for a road game. You can't do it, obviously, at the stadium on game day. Those are just things that you cannot do. Now, granted, there may be an issue of a lack of education here, especially with younger players, because it seems like the younger players, first and second year guys, are mostly the ones who are getting hit with this. So they can at least somewhat claim that ignorance. But for veteran players out there that have been caught doing this, there's no excuse. They have to know that the rules are the rules here. For Ioma Uwazurike, considering that he's just going into his second year, I'll probably give him the pass and fall him into that category of he just wasn't clearly aware of the NFL's rules. But either that's on the NFL for not making those rules clear and obvious to the rookies, or that's on the players for not reciprocating those rules. But at the end of the day, Ioma Uwazurike is responsible for what happened here, and he's going to have to walk the plank and take this punishment from the NFL. We've seen players such as Isaiah Rodgers and a couple members of the Detroit Lions who were suspended indefinitely for gambling. They actually ended up getting cut. I would not be surprised at all if this ended up happening with Ioma Uwazurike, considering that he was a holdover from the previous regime. However, this does put a significant strain on the Denver Broncos defensive line, and shifting to the football side of things, this all but confirms that the Denver Broncos are going to need to add at least 2 players, in my opinion, to their defensive line. So if we come over here and look at the Denver Broncos depth chart on their defensive line, Ioma Uwazurike's departure is going to leave a massive hole on the depth chart for the defensive end spot. It was currently slated for Matt Henningsen and Uwazurike to compete for this right defensive end spot. Now, the Broncos just have Matt Henningsen there and virtually no one else. Jonathan Harris is a good depth piece, but I'm not confident in Jonathan Harris in the event that he has to start. And I already wasn't very confident in the tandem of Ioma Uwazurike and Matt Henningsen. They both did nice things last year, especially Matt Henningsen, but to insert them in a starter role, I don't know about that. Now, I feel like the Broncos are desperately going to need to make some additions here. Shelby Harris is the most obvious one because we need a starter. We need a starting defensive end. And right now, the guy who makes the most sense for us there is Shelby Harris, given his previous history with the organization and previous history in this defensive scheme under Vance Joseph. So, at this point, if the Broncos don't at least give Shelby Harris a call, I'm going to be pissed. Even if the Broncos bring Shelby back, though, I strongly believe that they're going to need to add another piece on the interior defensive line just to give them some more pieces to work with throughout training camp and the preseason, because we're going to need some bodies there either way. So now the Broncos have even more question marks on their interior defensive line, and this is a big problem, and this is why they needed to further address this position earlier in the offseason. They needed to make some more additions in free agency. It would have been great if they had not let Deshaun Williams go. That could have solved this issue altogether. So now the Broncos find themselves in a really, really crappy situation, and I don't believe they knew that this suspension from Ioma Uwazurike was coming, because if they did, I have to imagine that they would have made some more moves on the defensive line. One thing you could see the Denver Broncos doing is kicking Frank Clark inside to potentially start at that right defensive end spot, but we can't entertain that possibility until Baron Browning comes off the PUP list. And there's a chance that Baron Browning could miss time in the regular season. So right now, the Denver Broncos find themselves in a really, really messy defensive line situation, and they are going to need to desperately make some additions in order to compensate for this loss of Ioma Uwazurike. So at the end of the day, Broncos country, this really sucks. You never want to see any of your players violate the league's gambling policy, and this puts the Broncos in a really, really tough spot on their defensive line, and they were already having issues there to begin with. So now I really feel like the Broncos have no choice. They have to make some moves on the defensive line, and for me, the most obvious choice here is to bring back Shelby Harris. But I'm curious about your thoughts on this, Broncos country. How do you guys feel about Ioma Uwazurike getting suspended for the whole season for violating the NFL's gambling policy? And who do you feel like the Broncos should bring in to potentially replace him? Drop those comments down below, guys. I would love to hear your thoughts as always. Be sure to leave a like on this video, as well as subscribe and ring the bell as Frosty comes in to say hello, so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are two free and easy ways to show your support. It helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out to fellow members of Broncos country just like you and me. And until next time, guys, this has been another episode of Denver Broncos Syndicate. I am your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.